Lace up those sneakers and get ready for some handheld speed. We're taking a look at Sonic the Hedgehog Triple Trouble for the Sega Game Gear. Released in 1994, Sonic was in full swing of popularity. Sonic 3 released in February earlier in the year on the Sega Genesis, followed by Sonic & Knuckles in October. Soon after, in November, the Game Gear got its own Sonic love with Triple Trouble. The title somewhat had two meanings to it. Since the Genesis was having Sonic's third outing that year, Sega figured that they should title the game along the lines of number 3 as well. But a less convoluted way of looking at it is that Sonic and Tails are fighting against 3 foes in Dr. Robotnik, Knuckles the Echidna, and series newcomer Fang the Sniper, or, as we know him over here in the West, Nack the Weasel. I guess the word sniper was a bit too mature for our fragile Western brains. To make things even more complex though, in Japan, this game was actually called Sonic & Tails 2, making it more of a sequel to the prior Sonic & Tails game that was renamed Sonic Chaos in the West. These two games shared a lot of gameplay elements compared to the rest of the Sonic franchise as a whole. Let's dive in. Dr. Robotnik is up to his old tricks again as he continues to try and steal the Chaos Emeralds. And of course, he manages to trick Knuckles the Echidna into blocking Sonic and Tails' attempts to stop the mad genius. But also, another threat in Fang the Sniper weasels his way into the fight, wishing to take the emeralds for himself. You can choose to play the game as Sonic or Tails, both having unique abilities and items at their disposal. The usual Sonic-style gameplay is present here, where you run and platform through levels, defeating enemies with spin jumps or using spin dashes by holding down the D-pad and pressing jump, then releasing the D-pad for a burst of speed forward. Sonic has a unique peel-out move called the Strike Dash if you hold up on the D-pad and press jump. It operates similarly to the spin dash, but if you hold it longer, the boost speed increases a lot more. This helps with getting up to speed sooner, especially since you can keep adding to the speed by holding forward on the D-pad once you release the boost. However, this also leaves Sonic vulnerable to head-on collisions with baddies, so you have to be very aware or cautious of your surroundings. Tails' up button move is his ability to fly using his twin tails as propellers for a short period of time. In this game, it operates a bit differently than its 16-bit counterparts. On the Genesis, you just need to hit jump in mid-air, and his upward momentum was dependent on you tapping the button, otherwise gravity takes over. Here in Triple Trouble though, you have to use the up button from standing and can't fly starting in mid-air. Plus, gravity is not affecting his flying. He can just hover in place without any additional inputs, but you also can't release the flight until you touch the ground, or the flight time runs out. It seems like an odd change, but once you start playing the levels, you realize that the changes were likely implemented to avoid too much cheesing of the ability, making its application more strategic. As for the unique items, Sonic has access to a jet board in the Robotnik Winter Zone that lets him slide through the level while knocking baddies out. It's controllable, so a skilled player can manage to keep it going for possibly the whole level, if they can manage it. Hitting a wall hard enough or taking damage from spikes or from behind will make him lose the board, but there are monitors around that allow him to get it back. In the Tidal Plant Zone, he can also find propeller shoes that allow the drownable hedgehog to actually swim around for a short period of time. It's tough to control though, and you still need to find air bubbles for him. Tails, on the other hand, has access to the Sea Fox, his own personal submarine. It comes equipped with oxygen tanks, so there's no need to hunt down air bubbles. Plus, if you hit button 2, he can fire torpedoes. It also is able to use the front-mounted drill to bore through some rocks using the D-pad and button 1. Obtaining Chaos Emeralds are similar to many other Sonic games, with a slight twist. You need to find monitors throughout the levels with a Chaos Emerald picture on it and hit it when you have 50 plus rings on you. Then you'll get whisked away to one of 2 types of special stages. There's a 2D timed side-scrolling maze, and a 3D biplane flying stage where you have to collect a set number of rings to bypass checkpoints. At the end of both types, you have a boss fight against Fang to lay claim to an emerald. While core Sonic gameplay makes up the bulk of Triple Trouble, there are some pretty unique gameplay mechanics added here that don't show up in many other 2D Sonic titles, save for Sonic Chaos, where some of these concepts were first made. It is too bad, however, that the overall controls and physics felt a bit sloppy here, even compared to Game Gear's Sonic 2. I'm not sure if it's a carryover from Sonic Chaos, but generally, since both games came out after Sonic 2 on the Game Gear and have worse controls, that's not a good thing. Also, the hitboxes were wildly inconsistent here, both working for and against you. There were plenty of times where I got hit where I believe I was nowhere near the enemy graphics. Meanwhile, other enemies would totally be overlapping the player sprites with no consequence. Even platforming had some times where I thought I wasn't making the jump, and then I suddenly get teleported to the top of it. Odd thing to complain about, I know, but it makes for a confusing time getting gaslit by the physics. Complaints aside, I still felt like I had a good time with this game. Levels were interesting, had good length, and challenges didn't feel insurmountable. The gameplay of Sonic Triple Trouble gets a 7 out of 10. I can easily say this is the best looking Sonic game on the Game Gear. While hardware limitations were still very much a major factor, the look of Triple Trouble closed the gap of visual quality between the 8-bit and 16-bit counterparts. The backgrounds and platforms were quite detailed and made smart use of the limited pixels to get in some shading and highlights. You'd almost swear the zones were in Sonic 1 on the Genesis. I'll especially point out that the Meta Junglera zone just looks chock full of pixel precision details. Character sprites were a major step up from Game Gear Sonic 2, and even improved on what Sonic Chaos had to offer. Both Sonic and Tails felt a bit taller and less stumpy. Fang presented well in his debut. Even Robotnik had just a bit more charm to his design here too. The big surprise to me in Triple Trouble is Knuckles' sprite. He looks almost like a pixel-for-pixel replica of his Genesis counterpart. In contrast though, while I did say Sonic's sprite was improved from prior handheld titles, he still just doesn't feel totally right to me. Save for his full-speed running pose, he just feels stiff and at times off balance. Good thing he's not standing still for very long. Another very important graphic detail to point out here is that despite the increased visual fidelity, the screen size actually didn't feel like a detriment to a speed-based game like Triple Trouble. Long has that been an issue that's plagued Sonic handheld games, but here they've somehow discovered the balance of graphic detail versus screen movement. It's just too bad that the improved graphics may have come at the expense of game controls. The graphics of Sonic Triple Trouble gets a 9 out of 10. I had to take some time to assess my feelings on the soundtrack of this game, as the answer kind of felt really weird coming from me. Usually, I will score music in Sonic games very highly, but Triple Trouble was just not vibing for me. It's not to say that the tracks don't match their environments, and I'm well aware of the hardware limitations of the Game Gear sound chip, but none of the music is at all memorable in this game. Okay, save for Act 3 of Sunset Park, that one was an epic tune, but it lasted all of 20 seconds, and then it was gone. Boss music felt generic, the title song is okay, but mainly just there, and the final boss music felt like less Robotnik and more generic Russian bad guy number 4. When it comes to the sound effects, we're going to have a better time. Sonic Game Gear sounds are pretty classic, and a lot of them come back here. But it sounded like they also snuck in some sound effects from the Genesis. I had to do a double take more than once, wondering if I heard what I thought I heard, which I did. The music and sound of Sonic Triple Trouble gets a 6 out of 10. Sadly, I never owned a Game Gear, and my exposure to this game back in the day was limited to a few minutes on a neighbor's copy. Where Triple Trouble did latch onto my memory though was in its supporting media. At this point, I was subscribed to the Archie Sonic the Hedgehog comics, and of course, they did a tie-in 48-page special that incorporated a lot of elements from the game. Tails having his own submarine was pretty endearing to me. Also, there were a bunch of advertisements for the game in other comics and game magazines that were showcasing Sonic using items unique to this game. The marketing very much gave me massive intrigue, but my pester power just wasn't strong enough to get my hands on the actual game, or the handheld for that matter. The nostalgia hit gets a 5 out of 10. The Sonic craze was at fever pitch in '94, and Sega wasn't going to leave the Game Gear behind. There was a clear goal to bring as much of a Genesis feel to the handheld, and it looks like it was mission accomplished within the limitations of the hardware. But where Sega would have fallen short of the bigger goal, some fans would pick up the ball in 2022 when an indie developer made a fan remake of Triple Trouble that looked and felt like a great Sega Genesis title. With smart graphics, unique elements, and good classic Sonic gameplay hidden under 8-bit limitations, Sonic the Hedgehog Triple Trouble is definitely something of a hidden gem on the Game Gear that held a legacy even up until this decade.